Yes.
Okay. Welcome to the first hearing for consideration of the Lawrence number 22 drainage improvement petition. There's a sign-in sheet circulating around the room, and we ask that you please sign in to indicate your attendance. And I will go over now what will happen today. We will hear a report from the county engineer and Soil and Water Conservation District, and there are copies available of the report. Following the presentation, there will be a time for questions from the board. After the board questions, the board will hear from any interested owners that wish to testify. Those speaking for or against the petition must either be an owner as defined in section 6131.01 of the revised code or an attorney speaking on behalf of the owner. Before accepting testimony for or against the petition, the board will acknowledge receipt of any landowner's written testimony before hearing live testimony. We will first call all those wishing to testify in favor of the petition. We will then call those wishing to testify in opposition to the petition. And before testifying, you will be asked to take an oath. After all those wishing to testify for or against the petition have been heard, there will be an opportunity for responsive or rebuttal testimony. The board will close the public hearing after all testimony and evidence has been presented. After listening to testimony and the report of the engineer, the board will decide whether to proceed with the survey and design or dismiss the petition. The board must consider the following factors in making its decision: whether the proposed improvement is necessary, whether the proposed improvement will be conducive to the public welfare, and whether the cost of the proposed improvement will be less than the benefit that the improvement provides. And if the board proceeds with the petition, the county engineer will prepare plans, reports, and individual schedules of assessments for the project. When plans are complete, a final hearing will be set. Notification of the hearing will be given to landowners, and the board will consider the project. And at this time,
I will.
We haven't been
We
over
need to
I'm
do the
sorry, we
resolution.
do have to go through, that's right, a couple of motions.
Resolution number 22-1074. Public hearing for consideration of the Lawrence number 22 watershed drainage improvement petition filed by Kurt E. Whiteside.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion, vote.
Vote on motion 22-1074. Mr. Benton?
Aye.
Mr. Merrill?
Aye.
Mrs. Lewis?
Aye.
Resolution number 22-1075, in the matter of approving for a specific occurrence a suspension of Rule 3 speaker registration, Rule 4 limitations, and Rule 7 public comment procedures from the rules governing public comment before the Board of County Commissioners of Delaware County, Ohio.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion, vote.
Vote on motion 22-1075. Mr. Merrill?
Aye.
Mr. Benton?
Aye.
Mrs. Lewis?
Aye.
And I believe Dan Barr will be reading the engineer's report today.
Welcome, Dan.
Good morning, Commissioners. Dan Barr with Delaware Soil and Water, and we'll start us off by reading the first hearing report into the record.
Very good.
First hearing report, Lawrence number 22 watershed drainage petition per ORC 6131, December 5th, 2022. This report has been prepared for the preliminary hearing on a drainage improvement petition filed by Kurt Whiteside and others on May 17th, 2022. The original petition has been signed by 12 individuals representing 18 of the 146 parcels in the watershed. The general location and course of the requested improvements are quoted from the petition as follows. In Delaware County, Radnor Township, within the Lawrence number 22, the Herbert Lawrence 7401, Prairie Run number 21, Herbert number 21, and Griffith number 595 watersheds, and generally following but not limited to the course and termini of the existing improvements. The following is the nature of the work petitioned, as quoted from the petition. To generally improve the drainage, both surface and subsurface, to a good and sufficient outlet, by replacing, repairing, or altering the existing improvements as required and/or creating new surface and subsurface drainage mains or laterals as requested by this petition. Petition process. This petition has been submitted according to Section 6131 of the Ohio Revised Code, which authorizes the Board of Commissioners to act on behalf of benefited property owners to make drainage improvements. If the Board of Commissioners decides to proceed with a project, the costs related to the improvements and the development of plans, reports, and schedules are assessed to the landowners in the watershed according to the benefit received to their watershed acreage. These special assessments will be added to the property taxes for each property and can be spread over a maximum of a 15-year period. Property owners may also choose to pay their assessment in a lump sum payment prior to placement on their property taxes. Additionally, the improvements will be placed on the Delaware County Drainage Maintenance Program in perpetuity per ORC Section 6137, and the annual maintenance assessment will appear on property tax statements as a special assessment in the same manner as the construction assessments. These annual maintenance assessments are generally in the range of 2 to 3% of the construction assessment. It should be noted that property owners are only assessed for those improvements that are located downstream from their properties. No property is assessed for improvements located upstream. The public agencies that own rights-of-way for public roads and other public lands are also assessed for both construction and maintenance costs in the same manner as private property owners. The decision to approve a petition project is a three-step process. First, a viewing of the proposed improvement is conducted for the commissioners to familiarize themselves with the watershed and general conditions. The commissioners conducted the viewing for this project by drone video on September 12, 2022. Next, a preliminary hearing is held to consider the initial feasibility of the proposal. It is this preliminary first hearing that is before us today. If this petition is approved, a final hearing will be conducted to further consider this petition. At that time, final details such as engineering plans and specifications, cost estimates, and a proposed schedule of assessments will be known. Existing conditions. The Delaware Soil and Water Conservation District and Delaware County Engineers Office have made the following observations of the watershed using on-site and drone video evaluation and a review of available historic records, aerial photography, topographic mapping, and soils mapping. The Lawrence No. 22 watershed is approximately 972 acres. The predominant land use within the watershed is currently agricultural. There are also areas of rural residential, road right-of-way, and woods. Improvements in the watershed have been constructed using the ORC 6131 process in 1873, 1896, 1908, 1912, 1929, and 1974. These improvements consisted of subsurface drain installation and open channel construction. A portion of Lawrence No. 22 was petitioned in 1974 and is on the Delaware County Drainage Maintenance Program per ORC 6137 as the Herbert Lawrence No. 7401. The work completed as part of this project consisted of 1,600 feet of open channel extending from Lawrence Road to the headwall section of open channel. The drainage system does not appear to be functioning at or near optimal capacity due to a lack of comprehensive maintenance and the generally deteriorated condition of the infrastructure. The subsurface drain system appears to have significant areas of structural failure, as observed by sporadic blowouts along its course. The surface grade is impeded in reaches due to brush, debris, and accumulated sediment in its path. Significant areas of surface ponding have been observed in the watershed as a result. These conditions are indicators of an overburdened, aged, and unmaintained drainage infrastructure. While the existing drainage system still provides some degree of drainage benefit, it does not appear to function as a good and sufficient outlet. Estimate of cost, factors favorable, unfavorable, benefit versus cost. ORC 6131 requires the county engineer to state in a report the factors favorable and unfavorable to a proposed project, estimate the cost of the project, and state an opinion as to whether the benefits of the project exceed the cost. The following information is presented for your consideration. Construction estimate. The project would begin at the junction of the Lawrence No. 22 drainage system and Lawrence Road and extend upstream to meet the request of the petitioners. The primary items of work along the entire length would include surface drain shaping and grading, the replacement of existing subsurface drains, the construction of a grade stabilization structure, private drive culvert installations, brush and vegetation removal, and seeding and mulching of disturbed areas. The project has been divided into 3 general areas to better reflect the locations and cost estimates of proposed work. If the project proceeds to a final hearing, portions of these areas may be further divided into sections to better define the areas of work and the associated costs and benefits. This level of detail is not determined for the preliminary hearing and is only undertaken if the petition moves forward to a second or final hearing. The cost estimate as presented below reflect the requested project areas. The Lawrence main construction, $24,201.25. Lawrence North construction, $403,649.45. The Lawrence South construction, $185,858.25. Drainage maintenance, first year startup, which is 5% of construction estimate, would be $30,685.45. And project administration, survey, and engineering at $25,000, for a total project estimate of $669,394.40. Notes, it is important to understand that the above estimates are preliminary and made in the absence of a current detailed topographic survey of the project area. The above estimate does not contain a contingency amount. The amount of necessary contingency would be evaluated as part of the survey and engineering design of the project and added to the estimate presented at the final hearing. Contingency cost is typically estimated at 15 to 20% of the final construction estimate. Should the project fail to be approved at the final hearing, the benefiting landowners, as defined by ORC 6131, may still be responsible for the cost of project administration, survey, and engineering design. Assessments. If the project moves forward to the second hearing, the Ohio Revised Code instructs the county engineer to calculate the assessments to individual property owners based on the benefits received from the improvements for the various properties in the watershed. ORC 6131 states that uplands that have been removed from their natural state by deforestation, cultivation, artificial drainage, urban development, or other man-made causes shall be considered as benefited by an improvement required to dispose of the accelerated flow of water from the uplands. Benefits are further defined by the ORC as elimination or reduction of damage from flood, removal of water conditions that jeopardize public health, safety, or welfare, and increased value of land resulting from the improvement. Individual parcel assessments are not calculated for the preliminary hearing and are only calculated if the petition moves forward to a second or final hearing. Factors favorable and unfavorable. Factors favorable to the improvement: improved surface and subsurface drainage in the watershed, improved outlet for subsurface drainage components of household sewage treatment systems and for residential drainage systems, reduction of future deterioration of surface and subsurface drainage infrastructure, and annual inspections, maintenance, and protection of the improvement in perpetuity. Factors unfavorable to the improvement: temporary land use disruption during construction. The cost of construction and maintenance may be a burden to some landowners, and the removal of existing trees and brush in improvement area. Benefits versus cost. Assessments for property within the watershed are calculated based on the benefits derived. A publication by the Ohio State University Extension titled "Returns to Farm Drainage" details several studies conducted by Ohio State researchers on the effects of drainage on crop yields. The studies show that fields with good drainage will produce higher yields than fields that have poor drainage. A recently completed 25-year study showed that subsurface drainage increased corn yields by 24 to 39% and increased soybean yields by 13 to 46%. The same study also analyzed the return on investment for installing subsurface drainage in the field. It found that for corn, $4 is returned for every $1 invested, and for soybeans, $3 is returned for every $1 invested. To state it generally, the benefits of drainage will equal the increased yield multiplied by the market price. The increased value or benefit for residential properties is much more subjective and difficult to quantify. For residential properties, the lack of an adequate drainage outlet can negatively impact the condition of household sewage treatment systems, potentially limiting the value of the home for resale. Should the existing system fail, the cost to perform repairs or construct an alternate sewage treatment system can range from the thousands to tens of thousands of dollars. It would also be reasonable to consider the cost of environmental degradation due to residential sewage treatment systems that may not be functioning properly. Other benefits that are commonly perceived as a result of drainage improvements focus on quality of life and positive neighborhood perception. Communities that have planned and maintained stormwater drainage infrastructures generally have higher resale values than those communities that are known to have a history of drainage problems or flooding. Conclusions. Based on all of the information gathered and generated for this project, I believe this project is technically feasible and would adequately serve the project area's drainage needs. However, the testimony brought to the board by the landowners as to whether the benefits of this project exceed the cost should be given significant consideration in the decision to move forward with this project. Should the current petition be approved to proceed to a final hearing, the petition bond will be returned and detailed plans, specifications, estimated costs, and a schedule of assessments would be prepared. Additionally, a benefit versus cost analysis will also be performed to further determine the feasibility of advancing this proposed project.
Thank you. Any questions from the board?
Yeah, I had a couple questions for you, Dan. Thank you.
Yeah.
For reading that extensive report. Are the three, what do they call them, basically legs of the project, are they independent of one another? Can they be done, or is there a dependency of one on the other?
I think at least at this time, how we have it broken up, I think Lawrence North and Lawrence South would be dependent upon the main. The main would have to be done. The main could be done without the other two, but Lawrence North and South, they depend on the main. They all drain into it.
Okay, okay. The Lawrence 22 that's on the program, could you just talk a little bit more about that? Because it's confusing to me to understand that there are some maintenance programs in place in this watershed, and just what effect they would have.
Correct. Yeah, the section that's already on maintenance that was petitioned in 1974, it would be part of what's on the map as the Lawrence Main. It's the open channel section that's at the bottom end of the project in essence. And it, like you said, it's on the maintenance program and it's been taken care of. Don't really foresee as part of this project that there would be a whole lot of work that would need to be done in its current state. But if for some reason, based on the subsurface grade, if elevation upstream would require that we would need to do work to lower that channel, it still is part of this project. But as it was designed in 1974, it is currently functioning as it was designed then.
Good morning, Commissioners. Brett Bacon, Deputy Administrator, Delaware Soil and Water. To just expand on Dan's answer about what's on maintenance already, that channel was constructed according to the petition request that was made at the time. We don't know, without the benefit of doing a field survey, whether the depth of that channel is sufficient to meet the request that we have before us today. So that's why we're including it as part of the project. It's very likely that that channel is in good shape. It's obviously been maintained by our program. It may not be necessary to do any work on that section of the channel, and obviously that part of the estimate would fall off if that's the case. But without actually getting out there and doing a comprehensive survey of the entire watershed, we don't know if the state of that channel is sufficient to meet today's request.
Okay. Another topic kind of related to that is you talk about further subdivisions may be necessary of the main, the north and the south. How do you determine that? What could be the potential cost impact? Because that's kind of a new topic. I don't recall that we've seen that much in previous programs that we've reviewed.
I think a good example on this one would be if you look at the Lawrence North, I think you have the map, you can kind of see the red line coming to the north, and there's a couple laterals that kind of come off of it. That would probably be most likely where those additional breaks would be, to break out those smaller pockets, to break those costs down there.
Okay. So, but you don't expect the cost to change much?
No, those have all been, those costs, that estimate has all been lumped together.
Okay.
It would just be, the cost would be similar, it's just broken out into more parts. And that's to make it easier to understand where the cost is coming from.
Okay. All right, that's all I got.
I just a point of clarification, because when I read this and when you read it, the concern I had was we had the ditch petition in place, and were we doing the job well? If I'm a resident of that area, that would raise a concern, and I think you properly addressed it, but it was a concern that I think needed to be verbalized, so thank you.
And I have a question, follow-up on the dependency of one section upon the other. You said the main had to be done. Can just the north be done without doing the south, or vice versa?
Correct. At the way that this is drawn out at this point, the north and south are not dependent on each other.
Okay, okay. Okay. All right. And at this time then, I will ask for testimony from those who favor the petition. Excuse me, sir, if you need to speak, you'll just have to wait your turn. Okay, and I will swear you in.
Thank you.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
And if you could state your name and address and then your parcel number, please.
Okay. My name is Tennille Schoonover. I am the trustee and owner of 1980 Lawrence Road, parcel number 19 and 17.
Okay. All right, proceed.
I am actually the daughter of Kurt and Karen Whiteside, who reside in that property. And we originally started this petition to have the city take a look at the drainage in and around the property 17 and 19. When we started this process, we had no idea that the ditches in question had affected more than 100 properties. We found farmland that flooded. We have friends in which diverted water to get the water off their property and shared that they know that they've caused issues downstream. There are neighbors that we've learned that have battled poor drainage and frequent basement flooding. We had no idea the scope of what we were about ready to jump into. These ditches have gone without maintenance or upgrades now for more than 5 decades. Brett, in fact, shared with us that this whole drainage structure looks to be a good candidate to be fixed. With the new homes, terrain changes, unkept underground tiles for the sake of the future, it's time to bring this drainage system back up to date. As you're aware, this petition affects 5 ditches. We purchased property 17 and 19 about 7 years ago, and we noticed a deep hole in the property that was told it was an underground tile blowout. This blowout was big enough to put a small car in and is still there. Well, the car's not there. Sorry. What I was told by neighbors that our next door neighbor tried to dig a pond, which wasn't successful, which is property number 56, in which the home burnt in 2010, and no one's been there since. Their attempt at the pond was definitely deep enough to affect the drainage flow, not only destroying underground tiling for hundreds of acres, but also the terrain has been changed so dramatically that we now have a next door pond that is not supposed to be a pond. There was a video that was sent to Jennifer that will show you that what has happened just based on the lack of drainage from the few 100 acres across the street through our property 19 and 17 as it affects properties 56 and 130. The water pools on property 130 so deep that during rainy season, it can be as deep as 2 feet and stays longer for than a week. Would you be able to show that video?
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Pull that up.
If there's any comments you want to make as you go through it.
I feel like there should be sound.
No, we don't have.
No,
some.
okay. So that was just going through number 17, heading, oh goodness, I think that's east, across 56 and 20.
Flying east and west.
Right. I think is that the end of that
Yeah.
video? Okay. Let's see, the residual issue that this property 130 now has a 2-foot culvert in his yard and continues to add stone to his driveway. The dirt is now so high that it backs up the water to 56 and 17. The property 130 and 157 has pretty much a washout drive during rains. The drainage, both the underground drain tile and the top-graded swale, was and is so bad that property 20 took the flooding that happens on the surface and had a contractor put groundwater and tied their flood zone into working underground tile. This effort of property number 20 in taking surface flood water and tying it to the underground tile does show that the tiles that's beyond the damaged tile in properties before them does work. At the same time, we all know the surface water needs to flow and not be plumbed into an underground system. Thank you for your time.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to speak in favor of the petition? And I will swear you in. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God.
I do.
Thank you.
My name is Mark Taylor, and we reside on properties 82, 83, 50, and 128, kind of in the center, upper center of the map there.
Okay.
It's in the blue.
And your address again, sir?
2430, State Route 203.
Okay, thank you.
The parcels are held in my wife's trust, and so I've provided a power of attorney to the
Yes, we have that.
power of attorney to allow me to speak today. Okay?
Okay.
I brought a series of slides with me that Jennifer has over here. I'd like to walk through those. So the first slide that you're seeing there in front of you just simply details more clearly for you. It's off of the commissioner's map showing where the properties are. So as we proceed now to the second slide, just to give you an orientation, in fact, 203 is to the, as you can see on this slide, 203 is to the west of my property, and Buttermilk Hill is to the south, okay? Now, stay with that slide for a second,
okay.
please.
Sorry.
So when we first moved out there in the tail end of '94, you can see in that map, there are some red lines. Those show generally how the water flowed on the parcels, okay? Where the natural flow was. The house has then been, at that time, you can see the leach field is to the south of the house, and then you'll see an area that's in light blue that flooded consistently. So our leach field was consistently underwater when we first moved in. Furthermore, the sump pumps, we actually had 2 installed at the time, run more or less continuously. They will shut off for 3 or 4 seconds at a time, but they just pretty much run all the time. It got sufficiently bad that we were starting to press in on the basement floor or basement wall. You could see some minor cracks starting to occur in the basement wall because of the expansiveness of clay. So I had to do something to start to address this, and I didn't know what to do. We just started experimenting, for lack of better terminology. If I can go to the next slide then. That gives you some idea. You can see there where the grass is taller. That's because it's more fertilized because of our leach field, if you will. Okay, so it was on top of the leach field. You can see down in the lower right-hand corner where the septic tank lid is. And that flood then goes all the way down to Buttermilk Hill on my neighbor's property and up to the edge of the ditch, if you will, on 203 to your right. So go ahead and go to the next slide. These are series slides just to give you an idea of when I did that aqua blue area of what was underwater. This is all underwater now. Those pine trees that you see running along there are on the property line between our property to the north and our neighbors to the south. Next slide.
Mr. Chair, how deep is that water, in your opinion?
So, this is a better time to ask that question. Actually, right there is where it goes under 203. And I actually went out there during that storm, and I was chest deep in water at the edge of 203.
Wow.
Okay?
That area that we're looking at.
At the area there. So that is the inlet to a 12-inch pipe at the time that went under 203. And go ahead and go to the next slide, please. This is the outlet of that pipe. So you can see it was very compromised. This is now on my neighbor across the street's property, and it was compromised as to the outlet. And then go ahead and go to the next slide. So now I'm across his property. I'm looking back at you can see 203 in the background of that picture, and that outlet I just showed you that was compromised. This ponded on his property because there was no tile underneath his driveway. So it would back up on his driveway. Next slide, you'll see that the water had to actually go over the top of his driveway to finally reach an outlet into the fields beyond. All of that water was what was causing this backup on our property and on our leach field and into our basement, okay? We never had a quote-unquote flood in the basement. We were able to pump fast enough. So our first attempt was to try to determine if there was a way that we could deflect the water away from the house. And we added a berming up there. You'll see at the very top of the slide, I got a note where we added some berming in a yellow. And then we bermed along the edge of the leach field in an attempt to try to keep the water, to get it to flow to the west of the leach field and stay off the leach field in order to protect it. And that did have some benefit. You'll notice now that only about a half of the leach field was underwater during a typical storm, but the remainder of it still was. And the unfortunate thing is the leach field is divided, it's a primary standby with the leach field that you can switch between the two. And unfortunately, it's east and west that it's split, so even at that, I still had water over both sections of the leach field. I couldn't get it off. You can still see the flow plans down through there. So at that point, I was in somewhat desperation, and it turned out the state of Ohio was getting ready to resurface 203, and I stopped and talked to some of the people that were out there working. And I said, this 12-inch tile under here is just not getting the job done. We're backing up water all the time. And they put me in contact with a gentleman named John Adams with ODOT. John did these calculations that you see in front of you now, where actually that 12-inch pipe that goes under 203 carries 48, almost 49 acres of rainwater through that 12-inch pipe. And we had to work with ODOT, and he did the calculations and said, listen, what that really takes is two 24-inch pipes under 203 to move this volume of water off of your property. So again, working with him, he said, listen, here's the problem though. Your neighbor's yard, where the outlet was compromised in his driveway, is an impediment to solving any of this. We could put two 24s in, but his driveway's still gonna block it and it's gonna back up. It's your obligation to get us a ditch that will move this water under his driveway and on back to those fields. So if you go to the next slide, by the way, this slide just simply shows you, this was the first time that we knew even a tile existed, this Herbert 21 tile. We didn't know that existed. It supposedly carries 41 acres. I'm not convinced that it's working well. It does work to some extent, and I could prove that to you, but it's not working well. Okay, now next slide. So we worked, and you can see some yellow arrows there. We reditched my neighbor's yard. He was kind enough to allow us in and allow us to reditch his yard west of 203 between the first two set of yellow arrows. And then the second set of arrows, we provided 2 18-inch drain tile under his driveway. We were restricted to 18-inch because his well water is down by his barn, and so it served the house, and we would have had to re-lower that to get to 24-inch, plus the power between the barn and the house that powered the well pump. We couldn't really do, so we went to 18s. We spent stay on this slide just for a second. Down the lower left corner, you can see where it says $12,000. We invested about $12,000 in that effort. And as you can see, we made substantial improvement. The darker blue area now, which is down from 3 acres to about 3/4 of an acre, a little more, 8/10, is what floods now, okay? The good news is we got it completely off our leach field. It no longer backs up against our basement walls, but it does still pond significantly. Now if you can go on to the next slide, please. You can see this is where it still runs across the front of our yard, but it's nowhere near as detrimental as it was before. Go ahead. And that's just another sign. In fact, if you'll look down there, partway through, all of a sudden you'll see a grass strip partway through and then some more water behind it. That's the berming that we did originally to try to move. So you can see that we're down below the berming along the leach field in that area, okay? So we did have a benefit from that berming in addition to the fact that we got the 24-inch pipes underneath 203. Go ahead, there's just a couple more slides that give you some idea of that. Again, you can see the berming taking effect, and it's off the leach field, the end of the house there. There's no water standing on the leach field to the north of those pine trees. At the time, we had reditched his property. At the time of that storm, we had reditched his property. This is still the 12-inch line going underneath 203. You can see the volume of water is trying to transfer, and it just couldn't get it moved. Go ahead and go to the next. As a part of that, we actually eroded, because of that velocity of that water, we eroded, and we exposed the Herbert tile 21. That's the clay tile you see down there, okay? So that did get washed out. In fact, today, and I don't have a picture of it, there is a bunch of riprap there with the 24-inch pipes coming through, and it has collapsed further on downstream, and we've got some 12-inch tile we're ready to try to put in this coming spring to try to improve that because it's failed at this point. This is the new ditch that we put in. You can see it was working well, carrying the water. It's no longer ponded between the road and his driveway. You can see where it passes under his driveway. Go ahead to the next slide. Same thing, looking back the other direction, 203 is in the background. This is coming up to his driveway. It now no longer goes over the top of his driveway. Go ahead and go again. This is the outlet on the other side. This is a 218-inch that we put in. Again, we were limited to 18-inch. We opted, from a cost standpoint, not to add a third one. It would have really taken 3 18s to equal the 2 24s, but it was getting so expensive that we just said, listen, we're going to do the best we can with 18. Okay, so that's where that limitation stands right now. From there, I think there's one more slide that it just goes on down into the farmer's field. Now, there's significant erosion at the end where you can't see at the end of those, or it goes into the corn. There's a significant erosion there now as a result of all the work that we've done in the farmer's field. Okay, so it's not, the result is not really solved yet. It's still causing a problem. And all of this water winds up downstream in another neighbor's yard. He's going to speak probably next. Okay, so all of this water turns and goes south and winds up now we're aggravating his situation because we're getting it off of our property. Okay, next slide, please. This is a different area. If you recall, when I showed you the initial maps, I had 2 sets of red lines. One was more behind the house. This is the erosion that we have on the 5-acre parcel behind our house, where it is just surface water running and is moving all of the soil. It's exposing some of the field tile. Go ahead, you can keep sliding on up, that's fine. It's just to give you an idea of the erosion that's taking place, because the whole area behind our house is not working well either, okay? We need to I think I can work with the farmer that rents the property, and we can regrade this and seed it and make it into a waterway. Frankly, it should be somebody else's responsibility, but we need to get it done because we're just destroying his farm area. Go ahead and go on. And just another one, you can keep on sliding on up. So, kind of stay there for just a second. Kind of in conclusion, what we really did is we accomplished a lot of the goals, but we still have this ponding that's going on. Go ahead and move up a little bit further to the next slide. It's very, very hard to see in the slides, but there's a light blue path showing there. It turns out all of our roof drainage downspouts were French drained parallel to our leach system. I didn't know that until the fall of 2021 when I did some digging. I had water coming up out of the ground, out of the downspouts. It wouldn't get downspouts, and it was just coming out of the tile. So that tile was compromised, and I ditched out and have plugged what was a French drain along the edge of the leach field. Part of the problem with that was, before we did that, every time we'd have one of these backups of water, the inside of our house unfortunately smelled like an outhouse. So I had to install exhaust systems to try to get the odor out of the house so that we could even live there. It's been very, very problematic for us, okay? I don't have that problem anymore because I've now moved it to the surface. If you go to the next slide, I think it's where I show the picture. I put in some tile, and you slide up just a skosh further. I brought it out, and I man-made a catch basin, if you will, and I'm surface draining it. Okay, so now I have a swamp in my front yard, but at least it gets the water away from the house. And so that's where we are right now with this. It needs to be fixed, but it's better than it was. The last comment then, I think this is my last slide, 28 or 29. So there's a cloud that I show right there in those pine trees down right in about the center of the screen. Yes, that area right there. There's a high spot right there. The neighbor to our south would not allow us to come in and regrade that. I asked him at the time that we did the trenching on the ditch on the other side of the road if we could regrade so that we could get the rest of the water off our property. And he wouldn't allow us on his property, and I wasn't going to contest that. It's his property. So in rights, he's supposed to allow me to do that, but chose not to. We could get rid of most of the rest of the surface water if we could fix that grade point right there. And that's just a blank slide to say I'm done. Any questions for me?
Was that a natural heel or whatever it was, or was it?
Yeah, it's a natural high spot that,
Okay.
if we could grade probably 6 inches of soil off the top and reseed it, we'd probably get rid of most of this. And the rest of it would flow. It would actually flow off his property too, which I guess he doesn't care, but,
Well, your slides were very helpful. And
okay. Any other questions for me?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else who wishes to testify for the petition?
Good morning,
Raise
Commissioners.
your right hand. I will swear you in. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
My name is Curtis Conklin. I live at 2161 State Route 203. That appears as property number 91 on the diagram. We are on the west side of 203, in between Lawrence Road and Buttermilk Hill Road.
Okay, proceed.
So we built our house out there in the year 2000, and we really didn't know that we had bought lakefront property until we dug a hole. We had originally installed an 8-inch tile under our driveway because we didn't know what we were getting ourselves into. And then that spring when we started doing construction, we had a heavy snow in April, and it melted in a day. And the next thing you know, all this water is running through our property, washing out our driveway. We had 3 feet of water in our basement. Now, keep in mind, our house is still under construction at this point in time. So our builder was Kurt Hemmons, a person who's been around Delaware for a very long time. He was great to work with. He brought out, I believe it was the county engineer at that time, I can't remember. They poked around and discovered that, we had this Herbert tile running through our property. And they determined that if we could put a French drain in our home and tie into that tile, that they would allow us to continue with our construction, which we did. We had to run that tile 400 feet out from our basement, out to connect to the lowest point in our property into that Herbert tile, and we had only about 6 inches of fall in that amount of span, so it was very, minimal. That worked pretty good until we had the next heavy rain that spring, and the house was still under construction, and we had 3 feet of water in our basement a second time. What they determined was happening was, once that Herbert tile would fill up, that water was backing up 450 feet into our basement because that French drain no longer had anywhere for it to go. So they went back in and they put 2 check valves in that tile, in that French drain, so that, in the event of a stick or something coming back in there and blocking one of those flaps, check valves from closing, the second one would go ahead and close. So when that happens, it's incumbent upon our sump pump to run and keep the water out of our basement. And, knock on wood, in the 22 years that we've been there, we've never had a flooded basement. Fortunately for us, I don't share Mark's problems from a leach field perspective. Our leach field is a little bit on a higher section of our property that does not go underwater. However, as you will see in these pictures that I have shared with Jennifer Walraven, we certainly have a lot of water that comes to our property. We're unique in this situation in that if you look at the map, you'll see that this tile comes through the front of our property and also through the back of our property, okay? So we're getting it from 2 directions. That water coming from the back, as Mark pointed out, is coming from where that water is running through his neighbor's property and then coming downstream along that straight line that runs down toward Lawrence Road. And then the water that comes to the front of our property that kind of snakes through there's actually, I believe, and I've never measured it, looks to be at least a 24-inch tile or culvert that runs under State Route 203, pulls water off of the east side of State Route 203, moves it to the west side. It meanders through our property, under our driveway, and goes on over toward Lawrence Road. When we had that initial flood, we ended up taking out that single 8-inch tile that we had under our driveway, and we replaced that with 3 12-inch tiles that run under our driveway now. Okay, so that's been that way for 21 years now. And as you will see, there are times when we get these heavy rains that we still have flooding in our front yard. So I'll go ahead and start talking about what you see here. So the pictures that you're looking at now, that is a picture of our front lawn. We have a lot of trees out front. We have a field of prairie grass out front that we have put in to try and help with erosion and also just kind of promote a nice wildlife area, to be honest with you. We've spent a lot of time and energy turning our property into a very nice park-like setting, for lack of a better word. I will go back and mention briefly that we spent $20,000 in excavation when we built that house, trying to help this natural swale that ran through our property. We were aware, painfully aware, very early in the process that we had this water situation going on out front and out back. And so we had a lot of grading work done to try and be good stewards of the land and promote that water flow through our property. So this is looking down our driveway. You can see that we have water standing in our front yard. If you want to go on to the next slide, Jennifer, please. This is the backyard, okay? So this is looking back toward the field where the Herbert 21 tile comes straight down from Clear Pit Meredith Road down toward Lawrence Road. I went out and measured this morning the distance from the edge of that water out to where that tile runs through that farm field that you can see in the distance behind where my trees are. That is 274 feet, okay? That water gets to be at its worst, I'm going to say 30 inches deep out there at that back corner of that field, okay? So, and if you go back just a second, Jennifer, you'll also notice that the grass is very tall there on the right-hand side. That's because in the springtime now, because of the way our sump pump has to run when that tile fills up and evacuate that water, it daylights into that back area there. And the last 3 years, I've not been able to mow that area until September because of the water that we have had in that daylight, that sump pump daylighting out there and running, from October to June makes it such that I can't even mow that area out there until September, okay? Go ahead, Jennifer. This again just shows water lying in our front yard after a heavy rain alongside the driveway there. Go ahead, Jennifer. Another shot of water lying in the front yard. Next slide, please. This is also the front yard, looking out there. This would be on the north side of our driveway. Go ahead. This is the exit of those 3 18-inch tiles. So what you're seeing off in the distance over there, you'll see a house kind of at about 11 o'clock there. That is a home on Lawrence Road. So this is coming down our driveway, looking south. This is where the water is now exiting the north side of our property, headed south over toward Lawrence Road. And this is an area where those 3 18-inch tiles exit our driveway and moving that water that direction. Our property is unique in that Lawrence Road, where it intersects 203, is at a very high point. And so, and we're in the valley between Lawrence Road and Buttermilk Hill Road. And so we get water that comes down Lawrence Road toward our property. We get water that comes down Buttermilk Hill toward our property, or down 203 from the Buttermilk Hill side toward our property, and then it all moves back south. So we have water that comes from south to north along the front edge of our property from that high point on Lawrence Road, and then it moves back toward the south. If you look at this exit picture here, you'll see off to the left where looks like there's water coming off from the left. We actually also created a bit of a swale to try and capture that water coming downhill off of Lawrence Road from the south, and then allow it to get into this channel that would go back toward Lawrence Road. So it's kind of in a circular pattern where it comes off that high point at Lawrence Road and 203 and moves it back that direction. This is part of the extensive work that we did when we first built the home. This again is a photo of the back area of that property I showed you before, underwater. You'll notice on the right that I had to put snow fence inside the fenced-in area of my backyard to keep my dog out of the muddy area of that particular corner, because it comes up so far and it is so wet for so long that we had to cordon off part of our fenced-in area to keep the dog out of that area that was just swamped for months on end. Go ahead, Jennifer. I think I'm about done. Yeah, this is once again a photo of the front yard. Keep going. So this is at the back edge of where my yard meets the farm field. That is former Sheriff Al Meyer's property over there in the background. This is where that field is, or that tile is coming through that farm field, and it kind of cuts across a little bit to the left here and then goes back over toward Lawrence Road. This is some of that water that Mark talked about that's coming clear up from where he's at, going through his neighbor Gordon McDonald's property and then working its way down toward us on the back side of our property. This is that back section. Again, you can see once again the tall grass, once again Al Meyer's house in the background there. Just shows, again, an area that is probably, I'm going to say, 600 feet by 1,000 feet, or 1,500 feet over to Lawrence Road that is just underwater.
I think that was the last one.
Okay. So anyway, this is just an idea of how extensive the standing water can be during heavy rains in this area. I also had 3 blowouts of that Herbert tile on my property this past year. We spent over $2,000 hiring an excavator to come out and repair those blowouts. Again, we've been good stewards of the land and tried to be, conscious of our neighbors and the impact that we have on them because we are so close to the end of that tile. It's very important that we keep our system running and working, not only to benefit us, obviously, but it also benefits everyone upstream, and we are, very aware of that, and once again, want to be good neighbors. I will say that if you look at this map, property number 18 is the one just to the south of us. Right now, and we reviewed this during the drone footage that Soil and Water provided in the last hearing, there's a section of that field where there's a 250-foot string of blowouts in that field that has been left unresolved now for at least the last 3 or 4 years. That current property owner is not doing anything to fix those, doesn't have any intention to, as far as I know. I found out from talking to Soil and Water that they have no authority to go in and make that property owner do anything with us. It's completely, upon the goodness of his heart to do that. So those blowouts are really impactful because they are the last piece of property before that tile daylights over into that 21 ditch. So think about, the impact of what's going on with those tiles and how much of an impact that's having on everyone that's upstream in this north section of this watershed. Do you have any questions for me?
Any questions? No.
Thank you so much for your
Thank
time. I
you.
really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in favor of the petition? And I will swear you in. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do. Hello,
Thank you.
Commissioners. My name is Donna Lewis. I'm a property owner in the watershed, the northern part, and I'm also speaking on behalf of my father, Tim Bishop, who owns a majority of the farmland north of the watershed. I live on property 120. He owns 41, 42, and 121. The property 41 behind us, it is farmland. It is rented at this time. I should go back and say that my dad has owned this since 1991. He's farmed it several years prior to that. Since he's owned, I'm sorry.
Let me just ask our attorney here.
She can testify about her own property, not her father's.
Right.
Even with the power of attorney?
That's correct.
He's incapable of testifying. I mean, he's old, he's 90, he's hard
I'm
of
sorry.
hearing.
Yeah, that is what the revised code said, that you can tell us about your own property.
Okay. Can you bring up the pictures then, that I sent you, please?
Yes.
Okay, my property sits just in front of this. This is the farmland that floods behind us. And we've watched it over the years grow and grow, the size of this pond. And as of the last 2 years, this water has touched the edge of our property and is now going to start creeping into our property. We have small building back there and a garden back there, but this property the water keeps growing in it. And when you look at it from the top floor of our house, you can see the area that happens to be these farm fields. It keeps growing further south in size, and it keeps growing in size further north. The property, the neighbors next to us, their property now floods, and the 2 houses north of them now flood. So it would be properties 122, and then 43 and 4. They all start to flood as well. Excuse me, I'm sorry, I said that wrong. Property 34 and 142. But when we first started living there wasn't any water that come up close to that at all. If you could, the next 2 slides are the same, showing the same water that's growing in size in the field behind us. It's a large area, and that water will lay there for days and weeks. This is after the water has started to go away. This is a huge muddy area. So this is 2 large mud areas that form behind us, and it attracts all kinds of wildlife. It attracts geese. They nest there. This year there were cranes that were living there. So that it's obvious that this growth of this water behind us is getting larger and larger and larger. It's obviously touching the edge of our property now. So that's all I have to say. I was going to say more because of my father's farmland and how it's affecting that, but do you have any questions for me?
Any questions?
Commissioner Lewis, I should clarify, she can testify about her observations in the watershed. You just can't present testimony on behalf of your father. I
Okay,
should
well, that's,
clarify that.
yeah, I wasn't testifying on his behalf. I was just going to talk about what I see on his property.
And that's fine.
Okay,
Okay.
go ahead.
So this is his property here. And when he first started farming it, the area would be small and the farming would go on. And now, this is always the last field to be planted in the area. And sometimes it's replanted because even after the farmer comes in and plants it, there will be water that backs up on it again and they have to replant. So the expense for this farmer is huge. Plus, if it floods out, which it does almost every single year, it reduces what he produces in the crops. He plants corn and soybeans here. He has taken a financial loss on it each year. And my father even, I remember growing up with him, he has tried to fix this. He's had this retiled. He's had all three of these sections tile work done in 41, 42, and 121. And he's worked with local farmers who have backups clear up, it would be clear up in 72 and 32. He's worked with them before. They have retiled things even down on the southernmost part of his property, trying to fix this backup, and it doesn't fix it. It just seems to keep getting worse and worse. There's obviously a problem that's developed, and it's getting worse.
Okay.
Any
other
questions?
No.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in favor of the petition? Okay, is there anyone wishing to speak in opposition to the petition? Okay, I will swear you in.
Sure.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm John Dobbikin. I'm at, I think, 90 and 11, so I own 16 acres there.
90 and 11,
Correct.
okay.
I've been there for
And
29
yeah,
years.
your address, please.
2301 State Route 203.
Okay,
So I've been there 29 years.
okay.
Apparently, the tile runs in my farm property back there. The question I have is, it seems to me that there's never been a big issue until the gentleman that built the house that burned down and dug a pond and disrupted all the water flow down there is where the problem is. So I'm not sure why all of us up north are willing to pay for his problem. Does that make sense? So there was a house that was built, right, that burned down. He dug a pond. He disrupted the tile that's down south. So the water, when it comes down, it has nowhere to go because that was a disruption. So the rest of us upline are now going to pay for this repair.
Okay, I'll have Brent or Dan.
Is that
Want to
correct?
address that?
What do you guys think?
If I'm correct, the house that burnt down is on lot
The south.
56, I believe?
Yeah, it's down here.
Okay, so the drainage that's coming from your property up and through here doesn't actually pass through that. They're two separate legs. That would be on, what would be that Lawrence South?
Okay, well, so in the 29 years I've lived there, I've never had an issue with water. So yeah, Mark does have problems with Gordon's property, which is my neighbor. The water is not chest deep when you're standing on his side of the road. It might be knee deep. And it does pond up there, I get that. So he did work to fix that repair. I guess when I'm trying to understand, so there's $700,000 of estimated repair. 3% to the homeowner, right? Is what you had in the paperwork.
The maintenance assessments after construction can be anywhere from usually average 2 to 3%. But that 700,000 gets spread out over every acre within the watershed according to its benefit.
So what's the cost to me as a homeowner?
That has not been determined at this time. That would be something, if this would be approved today, we would go and actually do the engineering plan, survey design, and then build that schedule assessments parcel by parcel.
So it's undetermined.
At this time, per parcel, yes.
Gotcha. Okay, well, like I say, I had some questions about why the water's backing up, because I've been there for 29 years. It's continually gotten worse and worse over time, I get that. It doesn't really affect my property. The water does run through my field, but it doesn't exist for more than 6 or 8 hours. It drains. So I guess all I was gonna ask, I don't really understand what the cost is. And to me, I don't really have a need to repair it. I'll maintain my property, that's fine. So,
Any
anyways.
comments that you want to make?
I mean, the cost estimate, as it would be, we have to assume at this point in the project that everything would need to be reworked. Since we haven't been out there, we've only been able to fly a drone, have been to a couple spots in the watershed at this point. We kind of have to make the assumption that all the surface drains, so your surface drain, grass waterway, potentially needs regraded, culvert replacements, all of the tile, if it's, we have to make certain that if it's, right size, good material, good depth, all of these things. So at this point, we take kind of the 30,000 foot view and make the assumption that everything needs to be replaced. Now, if we go out, if this gets approved, and we go out and actually do survey and design and find that large parts of it are still intact and in good shape, we're not gonna fix what's not broken. There's no point to. And if it meets what needs to be done, it has to meet spec. We're bound by engineering specs from
Right.
NRCS, the Natural Resources Conservation Service, USDA, and ODOT specs are what we use. If they meet those, then we'll take it as is on maintenance and maintain that.
So as a homeowner, we have to maintain that for 15 years?
No, the county will maintain that. That
No
would be
cost.
yes, the cost could be spread out, and it can be spread out under the revised code as far as 15 years.
Gotcha, okay. Right.
Okay,
Any questions?
thank you, sir.
Yep.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak against the petition? Okay,
I would suggest we close the
Close the
hearing.
public hearing. Resolution number 22-1076, in the matter of closing the public hearing for consideration of the Lawrence number 22 watershed drainage improvement petition filed by Kurt E. Whiteside.
So moved.
Second.
discussion, vote.
Vote on motion 22-1076. Mrs. Lewis?
Aye.
Mr. Benton?
Aye.
Mr. Merrill?
Aye. These are always interesting, but I think the information I have witnessed today is compelling, that there is an issue, there is a problem, and we all need to remember that water that passes through your property is still your responsibility if it's downstream affecting someone else. So everyone should try to keep that in mind as well. So, but I think it's necessary based on the guidance that we're given from the state. Improvements will be conducive to the public welfare, and the cost of the proposed improvements will be less than the benefits the improvements provides, as we sit here today. And that's the purpose of going from this step to the next step, and I would strongly support it.
Yeah, I support it as well, although maybe not quite as, maybe I have some concerns. This is a significant cost. I think it's probably the largest one we've seen. We've seen dozens of these. I think that, I agree. I think there's clearly a problem. I would just like to see more financial justification, et cetera, for the cost to make sure that, and that centers around the agricultural properties within this watershed. I think they're the ones, with the improved drainage would benefit the most, and they're the largest share by far of the watershed. So I'd like to study that and learn some more about it as we go to the second hearing. But anyway, again, I support it. I think there is clearly a problem, but do have some concerns about the cost. But we'll address that at the second hearing.
I also support it, and I think that you've shown that there is a lot of damage, and it really does need to be addressed, and it should go to the second hearing, and we'll have more information. vote.
We need to, I need to officially read the resolution first. So, resolution number 22-1077, in the matter of proceeding with the project survey and design for Lawrence number 22 watershed drainage improvement petition filed by Kurt E. Whiteside.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion, we just had it.
Vote on motion 22-1077. Mrs. Lewis?
Aye.
Mr. Benton?
Aye.
Mr. Merrill?
Aye.
Thank you, and we will proceed to the second hearing.
We have no further business today.
No further business, and we are adjourned.
Thank you.